Alright boys, welcome to the wildest jungle high school you've ever seen, Seton Academy. Jin Mizama, our unfortunate human protagonist, hates animals, but guess what? He's surrounded by them. Enter Runka, the tiny but wildly stacked wolf girl who decides Jin is her mate. And when I say mate, I mean she's ready to pounce, clothes optional. This school has it all: lions showing off their main character energy, pandas using their soft power to grab attention, and more accidental wardrobe malfunctions than a cheap cosplay convention. Oh, and don't forget the classic anime slip and fall, boobs first, of course. Things heat up faster than a sauna when the crew ends up in the hot springs. Steam might block some of the view, but trust me, the animators made sure you wouldn't miss the important bits. Jin trying to survive without a nosebleed? Impossible. This is survival of the fittest, or maybe just survival of who can handle the most fan service. So grab your tissues for the sweat, and let's dive into the jungle madness that is Seton Academy, where the beasts are wild, and the plot is wilder. Jin's first day at this zoo of a school is a disaster from the start. The cafeteria serves only bugs, grass, and raw meat, leaving Jin disgusted and out of options. When he orders raw meat and naively asks the gorilla lunch lady to cook it, he's immediately branded a fool. To make matters worse, he unknowingly sits at the table of Runka, a hyperactive wolf girl with a singular IQ point who mistakes Jin's cluelessness for a food-stealing attempt. In a desperate bid to avoid conflict, Jin hands over his juicy meat, which miraculously pacifies the overzealous chihuahua. Grateful for what she interprets as generosity, Runka proudly declares Jin a member of her pack, a decision he vehemently rejects. Things take a turn when Hitomi, the only other human at the school, asks to sit with Jin. His daydreams of a tranquil, animal-free life with Hitomi are rudely interrupted when Runka jealously shoos her away, claiming Jin as her pack mate. Furious, Jin lashes out, calling Runka an idiot and explaining why a wolf pack with a human is as ridiculous as it sounds. Runka, hurt but determined, recounts how a human once saved her from bullying bears, sparking her belief that different species can coexist. She runs off crying, leaving Jin confused. Later that night, he realizes he was that human, but his memories of being brutally mauled by the bears don't exactly align with her heroic narrative. The next day, Runka's desperation to find a pack leads her to join Kuro, a snob zebra girl who heads the horse pack. She's even willing to wear a fake horse head to fit in. Jin, annoyed by Kuro's smug superiority and her demeaning treatment of Runka, steps in. He publicly exposes Kuro's donkey tail, shattering her claims of horse nobility. Humiliated, Kuro flees and Runka is left without a pack once again. Thankfully, Hitomi invites her to join the cooking club she's starting with Jin. However, their peace is short-lived when bear students ambush them, intent on eating Hitomi because apparently, that's just fine in this school. Runka bravely throws herself into the fray, giving Hitomi a chance to escape, but she's swiftly overpowered. Jin arrives just in time, pulling out a can of bear spray, from who knows where, and neutralizing the attackers. Unfortunately, he also sprays Runka, temporarily blinding her. Though Jin's intervention saves the day, the bears shake off the spray and retaliate, leaving Jin beaten and enraged. This awakens a golden aura in Runka, who briefly channels superhuman strength, but is immediately swatted aside like a fly. Luckily, their T-Rex homeroom teacher intervenes, biting one of the bears in half like it's the most natural thing in the world. After the chaos, Jin begrudgingly thanks Runka for her courage, which melts her heart. Overjoyed, she leaps onto him, licking his face in gratitude. Meanwhile, Hitomi watches, flustered and unsure how to react. The next day, Jin informs Runka that she must pass a cooking test to join the club. Just as Runka prepares to rise to the challenge, Yukari, an eccentric koala girl, appears out of nowhere, declaring her intent to join as well. Yukari explains that as a koala, she's only ever eaten eucalyptus leaves, but she's on a mission to rediscover a mysterious flavor from her past. Irritated by the prospect of yet another animal in his club, Jin devises an impossible challenge to scare her off, create a dish that could impress even the gods of anime. To his dismay, Yukari takes it in stride, preparing a eucalyptus-garnished pasta that wins over the girls. Jin's annoyance grows as he realizes Runka still has to take her test, and knowing her cooking skills, or lack thereof, he braces himself for inevitable disaster. To make sure she doesn't burn the whole school down since she has the cooking skills of a cardboard box, Runka carries meat with her mouth and even washes ingredients with soap. Meanwhile, Yukari watches Jin and Runka cook together and wonders why Hitomi isn't upset that Runka is trying to steal her man. In response, however, Hitomi calmly replies that Jin and she are just friends. Emotionally damaged and crushed by being friend-zoned, Jean begins to cry but immediately blames it on the fact that he's cutting onions. Now Jean hates Yukari even more than before and comes up with a devilish plan to make sure she never joins the club. He grabs Runka by the shoulders and convinces her that all she needs to cook a delicious meal is to pour all her love into it. This immediately motivates her to try her best, but the end result is a disgusting, vile dish that she thoughtfully names Runka's Love. That's when Jean reveals that Yukari must now pass the second challenge, which is to eat Runka's abomination of a dish. Unfortunately, however, Jean is hit with the reverse Uno card when Runka begs him to taste her love too, as she believes she's Gordon Ramsay, even though she's closer to being an idiot sandwich. While Jean fights off Runka, Yukari decides to dive right in and takes a bite out of Runka's dish. To everyone's surprise, Yukari recognizes this dish as the mysterious flavor she's always been searching for, which she now remembers was actually koala droppings all along, something baby koalas must eat to develop a resistance to the toxins in eucalyptus leaves. This realization petrifies Yukari, but she still can't stop herself from eating Runka's love. Meanwhile, Kurumi, a cat girl, secretly watches all of this horrible nastiness unfold. The next day, Kurumi sneaks her way into the cooking club and uses her cute, hypnotic purring to manipulate the gang into letting her join. Even though Jean is unaffected by this due to his hatred of animals, the girls quickly grow fond of Kurumi and allow her to join. As they cook together, Yukari and Hitomi are completely enthralled by Kurumi, while Runka fears that she's losing her place in the club. When Kurumi believes that she's won most of the club over, she then uses her cute, hypnotic purring to manipulate the girls into quitting the cooking club and starting a napping club instead. However, they surprisingly overpower the hypnotism and refuse, as the girls are serious about their culinary ambitions. Seeing her plan unravel, Kurumi claims that she's now bored of them and leaves the club. The next day at school, Runka excitedly leaps into Jin's face as she reveals that she's found a new member for the club. This new member is actually Mayubi, a lazy sloth who can barely muster up the energy to lift her head off her desk. When she finally gets up, she immediately collapses after walking just a few steps. With no other choice, Jean carries Mayubi back to her room, which is surprisingly full of sports equipment. Runka then tries to help Mayubi take a bath while Jean awkwardly tries not to look at her, but he can't avoid it when Mayubi overheats and nearly drowns after Runka runs off to get soap. After uncomfortably having to bathe and clean Mayubi, she thanks Jean for letting her join the club, which Jean immediately denies. When Mayubi reveals that she always felt lonely before meeting Runka, Jean feels guilty and decides to let her join after all, which makes Mayubi incredibly happy. However, she immediately collapses after talking too much. Jean also decides to let Kurumi join the club, as he knows that she's been secretly following them all day. In response, Kurumi surprisingly admits that she actually just wants to be friends with everyone. Saying this out loud flusters her immensely, so she instead claims that she hates everyone and immediately runs away. With this, the cooking club now has 2 new members. The gang decides to celebrate this accomplishment by cooking and eating delicious curry together. However, Mayubi collapses again from the energy required to chew. The next day at school, Mickey, the student council president, addresses the entire school and warns everyone to avoid interspecies friendships, as it is dangerous and unnatural for animals to socialize with other species. Once she returns to her office, however, she immediately sheds her clothes and reveals that she's actually a naked mole rat who sees clothing as unnatural and humiliating. Meanwhile, the leader of her mole rat army informs Mickey that they've been documenting the activities of the cooking club by showing her a comprehensive video describing each member of the club. With this evidence, Mickey concludes that Jean is obviously trying to set up a multi-species harem and sends her army to discreetly gather evidence against him. Meanwhile, at the cooking club, Jean and Runka are spontaneously kidnapped by a harem of lion girls and taken to King, the most powerful lion in the school. King mistakenly believes that Jean is an expert, Riz Lord, who can teach him the secrets to interspecies dating. As it turns out, King is actually in love with Shiho, an Impala girl who doesn't even know that King exists because he's too shy to speak to her and always just has his mane do the talking for him. With Jin's advice, King finally gains the confidence to try and talk to Shiho. However, his harem accidentally knocks his head against the door frame while carrying him out of the room. Throughout the rest of the day, King tries to approach Shiho several times but ends up scaring her off at every opportunity due to his incredibly intimidating demeanor. He even tries hiding in the bushes for her, like a true gentleman, but somehow that doesn't work either. At the end of the day, even the mole rats, who have been recording every moment of the cooking club's activities, can't help but laugh at King's disastrous attempts at romance. King's embarrassment throughout the day grows as he repeatedly fails, and his harem begins to tear up at watching him fail over and over again. Things quickly get crazy the next day at school when a group of male lions suddenly challenges King for ownership of his harem while holding Shiho hostage. They've noticed King's weird obsession with her, but surely there's nothing strange about stalking your crush from the bushes, right? When one of the lions threatens to devour his beloved Shiho, King immediately goes Super Saiyan, with his hair spiking up, and effortlessly claps all of their faces in a matter of seconds. Just as King is about to finish off the last lion, he surprises everyone by instead cutting off his impressive black mane, which was, unfortunately, the only reason his harem loved him in the first place. This causes them to leave him. With this brazen act, King finally gets through to Shiho as he confesses his feelings to her. However, Shiho replies that she's not ready for a relationship because she's not in heat. The two agree to just be friends for now, walking off hand in hand while the mole rats continue to record everything like a bunch of creeps. After watching the video of this entire situation, Mickey becomes even more convinced that Jean is not only trying to create a multi-species harem for himself but is also encouraging other males to do the same. She decides to confront Jean once and for all, even though this means putting on clothes, which is tremendously embarrassing for her. Mickey can't understand how the other students are able to walk around in clothes like shameless widows. On her way to the cooking club, however, Mickey and her mole rats bump into Kurumi, who, being a cat, is eager to toy with her new rodent friends. In order to protect their queen, the mole rats bravely sacrifice themselves to be Kurumi's playthings, while Mickey goes ahead to confront Jean. Once she arrives at the club room, Mickey immediately accuses Jean of being a perv while simultaneously shedding her clothes again. She orders Jean to disband the cooking club, claiming it's just a guise for him to create his harem. Just as Jean denies this claim, King casually waltzes in with impeccable timing and offers Jean some advice on managing a harem. However, when Runka saves the mole rats from being eaten by Kurumi, the mole rats convince Mickey that there's nothing unnatural or wrong about being friends with another species after all. Mickey decides to leave the cooking club alone for now but promises to continue keeping a close eye on Jean. Sometime later, it's revealed that after King cut off his hair, his throne became available, and the males of the school have started to fight amongst themselves to determine who can be the school's next top dog, or top lion, or whatever. Rumor has it that an unknown person has been single-handedly defeating every contender for King's throne. Meanwhile, Farrell, Runka's giant older sister, arrives at Runka's school but nervously hides while spying on her little sister. When she overhears Jean call Runka a dumb dog, she furiously bursts into the cooking club and threatens to rip his head off. However, her anger quickly subsides when she's reminded of how cute Runka is, which is strange since loving your sister this much is usually reserved for Roge protagonists. Farrell then asks Runka to come back to her pack, but Runka refuses, claiming that Jean and she are basically husband and wife now. Jean, of course, immediately denies this, but because of this statement, Farrell becomes convinced that the only way to get Runka back is to make Jean a pack member too. When Runka says this would only make her hate her, Farrell is completely crushed and defeated by these words. She has to be carried out by her pack members. The next day, several lion boys mistakenly believe that Jean is powerful enough to have defeated Farrell and decide that they now need to defeat him in order to win King's throne. However, Yenna, a hyena, appears out of nowhere and instantly defeats the lions in just a few seconds while a gaggle of Yenna's fangirls watch in awe. Yenna then challenges Jean to a fight to prove he's stronger than Farrell. Jean immediately refuses to fight a girl, which completely catches Yenna off guard. Yenna insists that he's a boy but is left speechless when Jean points out that only female animals look half human, while males don't. This causes Yenna to barge into the cooking club later that day, determined to prove to Jean that he is indeed a male and refusing to leave until Jean admits it. Jean just agrees without hesitation that Yenna's a male and shoos him off, but Yenna knows this isn't sincere and decides to prove once and for all that he's a male. Meanwhile, the mole rats inform Mickey that Yenna is causing trouble in the cooking club and show her a video of Jean pulling down Yenna's trousers, which makes Mickey faint from shock. In reality, Yenna is trying to prove he's a male, while Jean is desperately fighting to keep Yenna's pants on. When Jean then reveals that female hyenas also have a baguette between their legs, Yenna is completely shocked to learn this and realizes that he was actually a female all along. Later that night, Yenna announces to her family that she has accepted being a female. Her family is happy that she's finally realized it, so they give her a female uniform they had been saving for this exact occasion. Her brother even gives her a new haircut. This completely overwhelms Yenna, and she goes back to calling herself male after all. Sometime later, as the school sports festival draws near, Runka becomes overly excited to have the cooking club participate but is absolutely crushed when everyone else refuses, except for Mayubi, who surprisingly also wants to compete despite being so frail. Throughout the rest of the day, Runka and Mayubi begin training for the competition, even though the slightest bit of walking causes Mayubi to collapse. Things only worsen from there as the girls decide to help the mole rats build the sports field for the festival. Mayubi continues to collapse throughout the day and even accidentally crushes one of the mole rats with her bakery. However, Mayubi's willingness to help, despite how frail she is, unexpectedly inspires the mole rats to work even harder. Her unwavering determination also reaches Hitomi and Jean, who are inspired to participate in the competition after all. At the same time, Mayubi suddenly gains the ability to move at normal speeds, which to her feels like she's Sonic. While Runka praises this newfound energy as a result of their rigorous training, Mayubi immediately collapses, which, to be fair, is exactly what her training consisted of. Mayubi is then taken to the infirmary, where it soon becomes clear that she actually has a cold, which had temporarily increased her heart rate and given her the zoom eyes. With Mayubi now unable to participate in the sports festival, the rest of the team decides to try their best and win in her honor. Reality soon slaps them in the face though, as the club loses every single competition despite their best efforts. They simply cannot match the various natural abilities of the other animals, and the cooking club ends the morning competitions with 0 points. For the afternoon competitions, Jean reassures Runka that they can still win the sports festival, as the upcoming challenges are better suited to their natural abilities. This is quickly proven true when Yukari effortlessly wins the arm wrestling competition against the gorillas thanks to a koala's unexpectedly powerful grip strength. Jean also secures a win in the endurance race under the scorching hot sun, as humans have the most endurance of all mammals, though he barely makes it out alive. However, the chimp team resorts to foul play by poisoning Hitomi before the swimming competition. This prompts Mayubi to brush off her cold and take Hitomi's place, since sloths apparently have excellent swimming skills. Mayubi uses these skills to quickly take the lead in the race, but the chimp team cheats again by using a literal boat, causing Mayubi to nearly drown. Despite this, Feral, her goons, the mole rats, and the entire crowd begin cheering for Mayubi, giving her the strength and resilience to finish the race before succumbing to exhaustion and collapsing as usual. In a dramatic finale, Runka dashes through a challenging jungle course and uses her incredible wolf speed to catch up to the chimp team. She even threatens them, warning them never to mess with the cooking club again, before effortlessly winning the race. With this final win, the cooking club secures the top position in the sports festival and emerges victorious. Several days later, a panda girl named Mei Mei arrives at the school in a red limousine surrounded by a crowd of adoring fans who absolutely love pandas. Due to her species being so rare, Mei Mei is actually a spoiled brat who's used to being pampered and having her everyone catered to, usually by her red panda manager. While walking aimlessly around the school, Mei Mei is drawn to the cooking club by an irresistible aroma. In an audacious display of rudeness, she eats all the dumplings Jean had made. Just as Jean and Yukari are about to unleash some WWE-style justice upon her, Mei Mei reveals that she's the new panda student. The club members are all immediately amazed and starstruck to be in the presence of the new star of the school. Jean, however, is completely impervious to her allure, unimpressed by her status, and simply grabs her and throws her out of the club room. Having never been treated like this before, Mei Mei is completely embarrassed and confused. The next day at school, Mei Mei tries to cozy up to Jean, even offering him money in exchange for letting her join the cooking club. However, he immediately tells her to get lost, something she's never experienced before. Refusing to give up, Mei Mei bribes the other club members with expensive gifts to let her join the club. Just as she thinks her plan has worked, Jean continues to treat her like a spoiled brat and insists that she adhere to the same standards as everyone else, including cooking and cleaning up after herself. When Mei Mei's manager tries to clean up a mess she made, Jean adamantly stands by his principles and forces Mei Mei to clean the mess herself, greatly embarrassing her. As she continues to be chastised by Jean, Mei Mei embarrassingly realizes that she's secretly enjoying his stern treatment. The next day, Mei Mei returns to the cooking club, much to Jin's annoyance. Determined to find a way to permanently kick her out of the club, Jean decides that for Mei Mei to join, she'll need unanimous approval from all club members, including Kurumi. Like a typical cat, Kurumi reacts negatively to strangers encroaching on her space. To make Kurumi more comfortable with Mei Mei, the gang locks Mei Mei in a cage, a situation she also secretly enjoys. Despite this, Kurumi still refuses to give her approval. A stubborn Mei Mei vows to stay in the cage until Kurumi finally accepts her, spending the whole night sleeping in the cooking club. The next morning, Mei Mei awakens to find herself in a blanket, which she believes was a gift from Kurumi. Everyone's favorite cat then bolts into the club room and announces that she's decided to approve Mei Mei's admission to the club. However, since Kurumi is a cat, she rapidly alternates between showing fondness for Mei Mei and completely disregarding her. The next moment, Runka explains to Mei Mei that to be officially accepted into the club, she must lick the pack leader. However, Mei Mei shockingly licks Jean instead, believing him to be the alpha male. She becomes absolutely flustered when her mistake is explained to her. Sometime later, Yena, after clapping a few cheeks again, feels uncertain about how to act like a woman and decides to stalk and observe Hitomi to learn from her. Yena regards Hitomi as the epitome of womanhood. Meanwhile, Teru, a tiny honey badger girl, aspires to join Farrell's pack after witnessing how Farrell absolutely bodied the bullies at school. However, Teru's hopes are dashed when she learns that the only other female member who would be accepted is Runka. Misunderstanding this, Teru sets her sights on proving her worth by challenging Runka. On her way to fight her, Teru is unexpectedly distracted by a bird and begins chasing it like an idiot. At the same time, Yena's homification continues as she tries to imitate the way Hitomi eats, smiles, and talks. However, she always ends up sounding far too manly and tough. Hitomi decides to take Yena to the cooking club so she can learn from more girls. Instead, Yena is met with a barrage of criticism from Jin about her inability to imitate his beloved Hitomi. Yukari then suggests that Hitomi act like Yena instead. But acting and dressing like a rebel just embarrasses Hitomi, which somehow turns the situation into something with a bit too much plot for YouTube to handle. In the midst of this chaos, Teru casually barges into the clubroom and ecstatically challenges Runka to Mortal Kombat, but is swiftly kicked out by Yena instead. As Teru gets back up and prepares to go back in, she is once again distracted by the same bird and chases after it like an idiot. Over time, Yena's homification seems to work. She begins talking in a higher-pitched voice, acting cuter, and becoming much more feminine overall. The club celebrates her successful transformation, but the illusion is shattered as soon as she spits back up her undigested food, a natural part of a hyena's stomach function. Realizing that being a traditional girl is impossible for her, Yena decides to embrace her masculine side again. Teru then reappears out of nowhere and tries to fight Runka once more. Suddenly, a group of lion boys arrive, seeking revenge on Yena for beating them up a few episodes ago. They take Teru hostage, unaware that honey badgers don't care. They begin punching Teru to wipe that stupid smirk off her face, but her thick skin makes her nearly invulnerable. Teru, completely unfazed, eats a buffet of knuckle sandwiches while the lions tire themselves out in vain. Tired of concealing her true nature, Yena wholeheartedly embraces her masculine side again, unleashing a manly display of strength to defeat the lions. Meanwhile, Teru ignores everything that just happened to her and challenges Runka to a duel once again. When Runka adamantly refuses to fight the bite-sized tank, Yena steps in and challenges Teru instead. Teru agrees on the condition that she gets to fight Runka next. During their fight, Teru uses her stink gas, naturally produced by a honey badger's body. However, when the wind blows it away, the gas accidentally hits Runka, knocking her out cold. Teru celebrates this as a victory. Seeing her sister hurt, Pharaoh grabs Teru by the head and slams her into the ground with such force that it creates a massive crater and sends everyone flying. Shockingly, Teru gets back up but feels pain for the first time in her life, leaving her completely amazed. She immediately runs up to Runka to thank her for the duel, believing it allowed her to join Pharaoh's pack. Pharaoh, however, grabs Teru and twists her into a pretzel, denying her request to join. But when Pharaoh sees how happy it makes her little sister to allow another species into her pack, she changes her mind and lets Teru join. The gang cheerfully celebrates, though Jean remains unconscious on the ground. Later that night, Yena returns home and announces to her family that she's going back to being male. Her parents accept this without hesitation, despite having just bought her a bunch of new dresses. Back at school, Yena's newfound closeness with Hitomi makes Jean incredibly jealous, as the two seem to share a unique bond. This leads to Jean and Yena arguing and bickering over Hitomi's affection. Sometime later, Jin's class is sent on a field trip to their sister school, C Academy. Jean is annoyed the entire way there by Runka's usual hyperactive behavior. Once they arrive, everyone is amazed by how different C Academy is compared to their school. The students wear swimsuits, and classes are held underwater. Jean, however, is completely unimpressed by everything, except for the somewhat romantic scenery, which he hopes will help him grow closer to his beloved Hitomi. Meanwhile, Kana, a beluga whale girl, attempts to deliver a captivating welcome show for Jean and his classmates but fails miserably, running out of breath and fleeing in embarrassment. Seeing this as an opportunity to get rid of Runka so he can finally spend quality time with Hitomi, Jean convinces Runka that it's her duty as a boss to go cheer Kana up. Runka, along with Mei Mei, enthusiastically runs off to help. Moments later, they catch up with Kana and learn she secretly aspires to become one of the school's idols, known as the Dolphin Girls. However, Ruka, the leader of the Dolphin Girls, refuses to let Kana join, citing that beluga whales are too slow to keep up with dolphins. Should just showcase her singing prowess instead of dancing, as beluga whales are known for being excellent vocalists. Unfortunately, Kana turns out to be an absolutely terrible singer, so the gang is back to square one. Later that night, Jean is surprisingly approached by Ruka, who, due to the dolphin's unique sleeping patterns, alternates between two personalities. One of her personas tearfully implores Jean to make Kana quit trying to join their idol group, as a mixed-species show would only lead to public humiliation for Kana. But suddenly, Ruka's other persona asserts control and threatens Jean, telling him to stop Kana from participating, or she'll make him regret it. Meanwhile, like Ruka, Kana expresses her worries to Runka that separate species can't swim together, but Runka is confident that Jin's idea of singing will work, since she knows he's a reliable and smart guy. Jean accidentally overhears this and, feeling guilty, decides to help Kana by pointing out that she's been trying to sing with her mouth, but beluga whales actually sing using a special cavity in their heads, which Ruka had no idea about. The next day, Kana and the cooking club join forces to put on a show for the whole school. To everyone's amazement, Kana delivers an absolutely breathtaking song using her special cavity, which resonates in the hearts of everyone in the audience, including Ruka. Ruka is overwhelmed by the beauty of Kana's voice, and her two personalities converge. Both sides now express a desire to support Kana and help her achieve her full potential. This newfound unity leads Ruka and the other dolphins to join in on the performance, dancing to Kana's beautiful singing, ultimately resulting in an awe-inspiring show that leaves the whole crowd overjoyed. At the end of the day, Kana is finally invited to join the school idols. Meanwhile, Jean finally has some alone time on the beach with Hitomi, and closes his eyes, mustering up the courage to confess his true feelings to her. But when he opens his eyes again, he's shocked to find a random male giraffe sitting next to him, who replies that he loves him too. Jean immediately runs away, with the giraffe chasing after him. Sometime later, Mei Mei is jealous that Jean always carries Mayu on his back and demands that he spoil her the same way. So, Mei Mei leaps onto his back too, which causes Runka to jump on as well. Annoyed, Jean just throws everyone off instantly. Things get even worse for Jean when a sudden typhoon floods the school's underground, forcing the species living beneath the school to share dorm rooms with those living on the surface. Jean is forced to bunk with Mickey and her army of mole rats, who quickly take over his room, turning it into her student council office. Despite this, Jean is already living a pretty heavenly life, as his new roommate hates wearing clothes. However, Jean forces her to get dressed, seemingly just to annoy her, as he knows it embarrasses her tremendously. Throughout the rest of the week, all the students of the school come to Mickey whenever they have problems, completely invading Jin's room, which nearly drives him to the brink of murder. Instead, Jean points out to Mickey that she works with even more species than he does, which means she also forms interspecies friendships. Realizing he's right, Mickey is filled with such joy that she takes off absolutely everything, just as the cooking club enters the room and looks upon her in confused horror. Meanwhile, the sneaky mole rats continue to record everything. The next day at school, a new transfer student named and witnesses Jean saving Runka from a bunch of thirsty canines who have been turned into absolute simps by Rona's seasonal pheromones. Because of this, and decides to visit the cooking club to meet Jean, but finds that the only people present are the girls and the donkeys, who are all surprised and thrilled to see another human join their school. Meanwhile, Jean is busy hiding Runka in his room from the pack of horned dogs who have been chasing her around campus all morning. Since Runka is in heat, this makes her act like a sassy animal, and she suddenly pounces on Jean, unable to control herself around such an absolute Riz demon. However, Jean rejects Runka by claiming that he hates her, which causes her to cry uncontrollably. Later that day after school, Anne finally bumps into Jean and tells him that she's interested in him. Jean interprets this as a confession of love and rejects her, which immediately infuriates her. A couple of hours later, a depressed Runka finishes her heat cycle and decides to roll around in Jin's scent before going out for a late-night stroll. She surprisingly bumps into Anne, who's just cooking food outside in the middle of the night for some reason. Runka confides in Anne that she's having problems with her human boyfriend, and Anne responds by advising Runka that she needs to confront Jean head-on. This immediately convinces Runka to do so. However, when Runka leaves, she secretly hopes this will break up the cooking club. The next day, Runka confronts Jean about why he hates her. He admits that humans are cruel liars, implying that he lied when he said he hated her. Runka only understands this after Homie painfully explains it to her, but with this revelation, Runka forgives Jean, and the cooking club returns to their usual antics. Meanwhile, seeing Runka and Jean reconcile, Anne, who returns to her original school, Darwin Academy, regroups with her team, the Alliance of Extinct Species. This group is made up of several supposedly extinct species who seek the complete destruction of the human race, deeming them nature's greatest threat. When their leader asks if Anne has what it takes to see their mission through, she assures him that she will make humans go extinct when the school festival begins in a few days. Later, Anne returns to Jin's school and helps the cooking club serve food for everyone at their little cafe as part of the festival. Dina also helps out, but she and Anne instantly dislike each other as they both compete for Hitomi's affection. Meanwhile, Jean just fantasizes about how he'll be able to take Hitomi out on a date, and show off his amazing carnival games skills afterwards. While on break, Jean senses that En's team has arrived at the academy, and not wanting Hitomi to get hurt, he knocks her out and attempts to whisk her away to safety. But Dina intervenes before he can do so, leading to a heated confrontation. At the same time, Jean walks around absent-mindedly fantasizing about En and Homie fighting over him, and he accidentally bumps into Barbary, who's from a species of lions that went extinct because of humans. Barbary, a member of En's team, immediately seizes Jean and nearly ends his life. But King arrives just in time to save him. In response, Barbary immediately goes Super Saiyan and lunges at King before sending him flying with a swift punch. Seeing how weak King is for a lion, Barbary blames it on his attachment to Sheho and mocks his love for her. But when Sheho tries to stand up for King, Barbary slaps her across the face. That's when Barbary knows he messed up. King immediately turns Super Saiyan 2 and dashes towards Barbary. Although Barbary tries his best to withstand King, he is ultimately defeated with a powerful fist to the cranium. Afterwards, King and Jean interrogate Barbary about who he is and why he came to this school. They quickly learn that Hitomi is in danger because of En, so they head out to search for her. Meanwhile, as En is winning the fight, she tells Dina that she wants revenge on mankind for driving her species to extinction. But as she monologues, Dina finds an opening and destroys her spear with his powerful jaw. Suddenly, a woolly mammoth appears, and En immediately recognizes it as the leader of the Alliance of Extinct Species. However, as the gigantic mammoth grows closer with imposing strides, it berates En for going soft on humans and proclaims it will exterminate the human race itself. Just as this happens, Jean and the others arrive. Jean realizes that En is actually a Neanderthal and not a human, which is why she blames humans for the extinction of her species. Meanwhile, the colossal woolly mammoth is revealed to have been an illusion, with the true mastermind behind all of this being Kuroto, a tiny mammoth girl whose immense strength and overwhelmingly powerful aura cause her to appear much more massive. Despite her tiny stature, Kuroto effortlessly knocks out King and Dina in a matter of seconds. With some quick thinking, Jean manages to temporarily neutralize her by spilling a bag of marbles, because, of course, he has marbles at all times, a detail only anime can explain. Kuroto struggles to walk through the marbles, as elephants naturally avoid stepping on small objects. When Jean reveals that he has even more marbles, Kuroto instead proposes to settle the whole affair with a boxing match against Runka. The winner of the match will get Hitomi, because, once again, only anime can explain such a situation. As the girls get ready to duel, Farrell chastises Jean for allowing Runka to do something so dangerous, but Runka tells her big sister that she's determined to win and demands that she believe in her. Once the girls enter the ring, Kuro, a zebra, is revealed to be the referee since zebras have stripes. As soon as the fight starts, Runka confidently dashes around her opponent, but Kuroto's immense strength shatters both the ring and Runka's confidence. Runka continues to dodge every one of Kuroto's blows, as a single punch could absolutely destroy her. She narrowly survives the first round, being saved by the bell. Between rounds, En tries to convince Kuroto that humans aren't as evil as they once thought, with pure Hitomi being proof of this. But Kuroto refuses to listen. When the next round starts, Kuroto taunts Runka to let her guard down and uses this opening to punch her straight into the stratosphere. Runka is immediately knocked out but somehow gets back up, all beaten and bruised, before the count of 10. Jean then grabs Runka, fills her with hopium, by patting her head and praising her as a good girl while encouraging her to give it her all. Just like a normal dog being praised, this fires her up. But despite this, when the final round begins, Runka eats a devastating punch to the gut, followed by a life-ending uppercut that knocks her out of the ring. This wholesome anime about an animal school suddenly looks more like a fight scene from Baki. As Runka lays unconscious on the ground, the whole school passionately cheers her on to get back up, including Jean. She miraculously leaps back into the ring with newfound strength and determination to win. Meanwhile, En continues to beg Kuroto to reconsider her feelings about humans, but when she refuses, En has no choice but to end her friendship with her, which crushes Kuroto as she remembers how the two first met and bonded over their shared hatred of humans. Runka then dashes forward and hits Kuroto with the weakest punch imaginable. But a heartbroken Kuroto simply falls over, as she doesn't have the strength or will to get back up. With this, Runka wins the fight against all odds, earning the admiration of the whole crowd and all her friends. Following the intense fight, Kuroto and the rest of their team reconcile with everyone else. They have a wholesome time cooking meals with the cooking club, and then, boom, the kitchen explodes.